Is the 7-year itch real or just a myth? Probably depends on whether or not Marilyn Monroe is your upstairs neighbor. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I'm continuing my masculine feminine energies film breakdown series with the classic The 7-Year Itch. If you're not familiar with what I mean by masculine and feminine energies, I talk about this in a lot of my videos, but just a little summary. Masculine and feminine energies are energies that live within all of us. We all contain both energies, but we all have a core energy that is the energy we are most ourselves in. And we can be in wounded or healed versions of either of those energies, and each energy has different archetypes. We have all the archetypes within us, but we can be in healed or wounded versions of either one, and some of our archetypes are stronger in us than others, but we can tap into them whenever we need to. So let's take a look at The 7-Year Itch. The 7-Year Itch is a movie that actually, I just looked it up, it was from 1955. So this is from the 1950s. It is a Marilyn Monroe classic. This was definitely not her first film, but I do think this film kind of put her on the map. Like, it was really like an iconic role for her. And it's ironic because literally she doesn't even have a name in this movie. Like, when I was actually looking it up to like double check some of the background information about it, like she's just listed as the girl. And I was like, well, you're right. They don't even mention her name in this. So talk about being objectified in this film. And I have to be honest with you, like, full disclosure, I mean, I love Marilyn Monroe and I love Marilyn Monroe movies. This is not one of my favorites. This movie actually kind of angers me a little bit. Maybe I'm triggered, that's fine, whatever. I'm gonna go off anyway. It might make for a more interesting video. There's a lot of reasons why this movie really bugs me. The fact that she's just sort of this nameless character is only one of the reasons. I do know that this was a stage play that they then adapted into film, but I find it really interesting that the way that this movie portrays marriage and family life, it feels very propaganda-y ish, propaganda adjacent. I don't know what the word is, but it feels a lot like that to me, especially now looking at how much I know, many of us know about the media and that are waking up to these things. And the fact that this movie took place kind of like before the big 1960s feminist movement. And I have a video where I talk about my thoughts on feminism, which I'll link that video to this one. But you know, I talk a bit in that video about the concept of why feminism had such an easy time swooping in and really kind of stirring up the pot. And I think movies like The 7-Year Itch, the way that they portray husbands, I'm like, yeah, no wonder feminism came in and took women out of the homes, because would you want to be married to any of these guys? I wouldn't want to be married to any of these guys. But anyway, so I'm not saying that all husbands were like the men portrayed in this movie back in those times, but I am saying that the way that these men are being portrayed, you can see why their wives would get frustrated with them. And let's break this down. The star of the film is the character Richard Sherman, who is, he's, you know, a regular family guy. And it's introduced essentially that the common thing, particularly in New York City, if you think about it, this has a very like Mad Men, when Mad Men was a thing, kind of an aspect, although this is a lighthearted comedy. It's not like a heavy drama like Mad Men. But it's just this idea of like men go into the city and they go to work and they work at their corporate jobs, and the wives stay home with the kids, and every summer the husbands stay behind and keep working and supporting the family, and the wives and the kids all kind of go off to some like summer camp location somewhere. Now granted, obviously this was the wealthy families that did this, and the women and kids who got to go off on these summer vacations were the ones who were married and had husbands taking care of them. And the way it's portrayed in this movie is essentially that, well, while the husbands stay home and the wives are away, the husbands play around with all of the single women that are still staying in the city because, well, they have to take care of themselves because they don't have husbands to do it. So Richard Sherman kind of has this sense of like he's above this. He knows that all these men are doing these things, that all these men are basically just playing around on their wives while their wives are gone, and he's kind of got this image like he's better than that. Like he's not that kind of guy. He's not going to do that kind of thing. We do meet his wife Helen and their son Ricky very early on in the film when he's saying goodbye to them while they're going off to their summer trip. It's interesting how Ricky has a very strong imagination, and so does Richard. Richard's imagination actually is a big part of the film, which lends itself to the idea that Richard has not grown up. Like he hasn't actually become a man. He's basically a man-child. And yes, he has a job. He works in publishing. He obviously can support a family, but yet he's still a child. Like, he's still caught up in his imagination. His dynamic with Helen, the one time that you actually see them together, is Helen is really treating him in a very sort of, she's not like naggy in a mean way, but she definitely has that controlling, mothering energy. I have a video where I talk about the mothering energy in women. But she's very like, you know, talking to him like he's another one of her children. And yes, that is sometimes common, I think, when women become mothers. They get so used to talking to their kids in that mothering way that they start talking to their husbands that way as well. However, Richard in this film, even when his wife isn't there, has a very childish, childlike quality to him. If he's acting like a child, you can kind of see where his wife would feel like she needed to treat him like a child. Again, I know there's probably a lot of men watching who are gonna be like, you're just defending her, but at the end of the day, if you act like a child, women are gonna be programmed to treat you like a child. That's just kind of the way that it works, you know? And what happens in that dynamic is Richard is a classic wounded feminine. He is in such wounded feminine energy, and I'll get to all the details of what all the indications of that are throughout this video. But because he's in a wounded feminine state, and because opposites tend to attract, right? His wife Helen is obviously in a little bit more of a wounded masculine. You don't really sense that she's aggressive or mean to him, but she does have a very controlling way about him. She's much more about structure, like, I'm gonna call you at this time, and she's a little bit more aloof. She's not quite so needy and clingy. She doesn't really need his approval so much, whereas, you know, Richard is more of that, like, needing approval, that needy clinginess. He obviously doesn't have much self-discipline, like Helen is telling him, like, not to smoke, not to drink. He obviously doesn't have much self-control over that. He doesn't have self-control over what he eats. He's not really caring for his body very much. Those are all aspects, they tend to be more of an aspect of a wounded feminine. Addictive behaviors, lack of self-discipline, self-abuse in some way, which can even involve just putting really bad things in your body, like, you know, consuming bad foods and things like that. He kind of tries to be disciplined and thinks he should be disciplined, but he really can't pull that off. So it's that lack of discipline. And he obviously, you know, he has a job. He obviously works very hard at his job, but you can kind of tell that, like, this isn't his passion in life. Because if this was really his passion and his drive in life, he would be more driven and more motivated to do his job, as opposed to trying to distract himself with all these other things, like his fantasy life, his drinking, his smoking, that kind of stuff. He also mentions at one point about how much he loves their apartment, which is kind of like more of a townhousey kind of apartment place. Like, makes a comment that he doesn't know why Helen would want to move to a bigger house or anything. Kind of shows a lack of, like, not wanting to commit to creating a home. That's all kind of like that. Again, it's that wounded feminine energy. Now, masculine energy does tend to desire freedom. It doesn't like to be confined and tied down. That is a quality of masculine energy. However, typically that strive for freedom comes from wanting the freedom to find your greater purpose in life, to live your purpose, and to fulfill your reason for being here, right? There's like a greater purpose that's bigger than himself in masculine energy, when that's in a healthy way. The thing you notice, and actually it's not just Richard, but all the men in this film, their desire for freedom comes from well, I just want to overindulge. I don't like that my wife, like, I can't have fun when my wife is around. So as soon as my wife leaves, I get to gamble, I get to smoke, I get to drink, I get to, like, fool around with a lot of different women. Like, all those behaviors, which I think we kind of almost associate now with men or males, like, that's not a healthy expression of true masculinity. That's actually, like, that desire for freedom to do that stuff is almost like a childish rebellion of, like, well, my wife is like my surrogate mom, so now I want to go off and I want to do all these other things. But they're never gonna fulfill you. I mean, these guys are not gonna be fulfilled. And most likely they're not fulfilled because they're just doing these menial jobs that they don't really enjoy doing, just doing it for the money, and they're resenting their wives for having to make the money in order for them to have a comfortable life. And the women are probably resenting them, I would be, for the way that these guys are behaving when the women aren't around. It really portrays marriage and relationships and men and women in such a negative light. And I just, oh, I get really frustrated with this film, to be honest with you, but we're gonna keep going. So a part of this film is that Richard has this wild imagination that goes crazy, right? He just kind of falls down these like rabbit holes of imagination. And one thing I've noticed, and this is a sign of how unbelievably wounded feminine he actually is he goes through these fantasies about women. He has this sort of like montage of fantasies about like his secretary, about nurses in a hospital, like all of these women. And if you notice in these fantasies, the women are always the aggressors. Like he's always kind of like this, oh, I'm just a victim of women just being so attracted to me. And these women are all taking the aggressive role of like pursuing him. That's actually that role of being like the more submissive, laid back, like attracting in, that's very feminine energy, and that pursuing energy is very masculine energy. So even in Richard's fantasy life, he's fantasizing about being the feminine energy in the relationship and these women as being the masculine energy, which is exactly what he has at home. Is his wife is taking on the more masculine role. She's not throwing herself at him. Whether she did in the beginning of their relationship or not, we don't know. But you know, he's taking on the feminine role even in his fantasy life. And there's a really, actually, it's just, I think it's just meant to be like a silly, funny little comment that happens in the movie, but I think it's really, really telling, and it really popped out at me. Was at one point, Helen calls Richard to check up on him, to see how things are going, and they're having a conversation. And she mentions that Tom Mackenzie, who is a writer that Richard knows, who we find out is actually sort of a very sort of masculine guy. He writes very masculine characters in his writing, that he is actually at this summer vacation place. And Richard immediately jumps into jealousy. And Helen makes a comment that Tom has helped her carry Ricky's canoe to the lake. And all of a sudden Richard gets really angry, and he's like, I don't want Tom carrying Ricky's canoe. If anyone's gonna carry Ricky's canoe, it's gonna be you, meaning Helen. Richard is so like dropped back in his feminine energy that the thought of a masculine male actually taking the lead and helping out his wife so that Helen, his wife, doesn't have to be the masculine, Richard's upset about that. Like, that's a threat to him. He's intimidated by that. Like, he's freaked out about that. But like, he doesn't want to step into the masculine role. Granted, I know he wasn't actually present in that moment, but like, he's left Helen in charge, and like, he's upset that like she's not taking on the masculine role of doing everything for their child and accepting help from another man. You kind of wonder, if they had been home, if Richard would have actually stepped up and actually been the masculine role and helped out had he been there, because he's so intimidated by the fact that there's a masculine male who is willing to take on that role with his wife, even in a very innocent way. That to me is so telling. It's like, it's so obvious that Richard doesn't want to take on the masculine role, but he doesn't want his wife to experience a masculine role, because he knows in the back of his head that that's really what women want, but he doesn't want to step into that role. So then we find out that Marilyn Monroe is subletting the apartment upstairs from Richard, and he meets her. She is, you know, young, pretty, she's a model.
Yes? What is it?
I'm terribly sorry to bother you, but I forgot the key to my front door, so I had to ring your bell. I feel so silly.
It's perfectly all right.
In this film, Marilyn Monroe really does embody, I believe, the maiden and the lover. Many people think of Marilyn Monroe as being the lover archetype in the feminine archetypes. I have other videos where I give more detailed information about what the archetypes are. But in feminine archetypes, she's very much known as being the lover, and she does have a lot of lover energy in this film.
Oh, do you feel the breeze from the subway? Isn't it delicious?
She's very sensual. She's very turned on by life. However, in this role in particular, she really embodies the maiden character. And Marilyn does not always embody the maiden. I think some people get her confused with, is she a maiden, is she a lover? I think she's both a lot of the time, because she does have that that sex appeal, but she also has that very like wide-eyed innocent quality. But she does have a range, and she does actually, I'm gonna do more Marilyn Monroe films because she really is kind of a fascinating study. But in this film in particular, in The 7 Year Itch, she is very, very much a maiden character. She's very wide-eyed, she's very innocent. In fact, she really doesn't even pick up on a lot of Richard's really obvious advances. She lets things go. Things just fluff off of her. She's sort of very naive. You know, Richard's like, hey, come over. She doesn't know him. She just kind of comes over. They have a drink. He actually lies to her several times. He says he's not married. She finds out he is married. And she's like, oh, that's great. It's so great because, well, you're married, so I don't have to worry about you proposing to me. You know, it's just, she just fluffs that stuff off, which again, because this is like a, you know, like a fun rom-com kind of a movie, nothing really bad happens. But like, I gotta be honest, in real life, if she was that carefree with some strange man that she had just met, things could have gone very differently. So she is a maiden in this, which is really great that she has this wide-eyed innocence to her. It's very appealing, it's very attractive. Obviously, Richard's very attracted to her. Many people are very attracted to her. However, she doesn't have any boundaries or like discernment. She's not like awake to the fact that Richard is actually being quite lecherous with her. If this was real life, that lack of boundaries and that kind of like wide-eyed, like anything goes energy could get her in trouble. She does also have a really great lover energy, and that's just one of the beauties, I think, of Marilyn Monroe in general, and particularly in this role, is that she does have that combination of like the wide-eyed maiden with that like sensual lover energy.
Let me just go put something on. I'll go into the kitchen and get dressed.
The kitchen?
Yes, when it's hot like this, you know what I do? I keep my undies in the icebox.
And I do think, like, she has a really great energy in this film. If you notice, she's never doing anything to impress him. She's doing everything from, like, what she feels like. She wants champagne, she buys herself a bottle of champagne, and she's going to enjoy champagne. And then they decide to enjoy champagne together, but it's, you know, she decides, well, you can't drink champagne just in pants, so I'm going to put on a cocktail dress and, you know, dress up, because why not dress up to drink champagne and potato chips in my own house?
I figured it just isn't right to drink champagne in matador pants. Would you mind fastening my straps in the back?
Oh, sure. Sure.
Potato chips, champagne.
Champagne and potato chips are excellent together, by the way, just so you know. But yeah, it's like she's never doing it to impress him. There's that lack of neediness. There's that lack of trying to impress him that actually makes her that much more appealing, because she's just living her authentic life, and she's just being herself. She's talking about, it's kind of implied that she has a nude photograph in a magazine that's in his house, although we do actually see the photograph and she's just in a bikini. She's not actually naked, but for those days it was quite skimpy. And she's, you know, she takes a bubble bath, she, you know, paints her toes. She does all these kind of like feminine things, but it's never seen as trying to do it to impress someone, to turn a man on. It's just so effortless. And I do think that that's one of the beauties of this film, and the thing that I do like about this film is the lessons that you can learn from her, in that sense of you just enjoying your life. And when you enjoy life, people are magnetized to you, people are drawn to you, because you're just loving and enjoying your life. That's one of the reasons why I really love her in this film. It's also like when Richard tries to impress her with like some really fancy classical music, and she's just kind of like, it's not my thing, you know, like she's not trying to impress him at all or pretend that she's interested in what he's interested in. And when she does get really into something, she does get really excited about something, like that turns him on even more, because it's her excitement, right, as opposed to like pretending to like something just to impress a man.
I don't know about Rachmaninoff with it shakes you and quakes you and stuff, but this really gets me.
It does?
And how? I can feel the goose pimples.
Goose pimples?
Uh-huh.
Like what you like, own what you like, enjoy your life and enjoy yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to exclude someone from it. Like she was never like, well, I don't like this and I'm gonna shame you for liking this, or I'm gonna make fun of you for liking this. She's just like, I like this, I'm into this, I want to do this. It's just, she's so carefree, and it just magnetizes people to her. I gotta be honest, I mean, I know in this film, you know, Richard thinks he's kind of like up on his high horse, like, oh, well, you know, I'm not like these other men, I'm not fooling around with other women, but like, they kiss a few times in this. It's not like make out passionate kissing, but there's a few kisses. He takes her to a movie. He's inviting her over for drinks. I know that it's all considered like innocent, but I gotta be honest, if I was his wife, I would consider most of what he was doing cheating. And I know that like cheating becomes a matter of boundaries, and it's a matter of what's established in the relationship. And of course, he's got these vivid imaginations of his wife off having an affair with this Tom character. But at the end of the day, like, this isn't, I don't know, this just, it portrays marriage in such a kind of icky way. Like, everybody's unhappy, everybody's miserable. The men aren't really living their true purpose. They're just suffering. The women are basically just dealing with man children and having to keep them in line. And I mean, that's exhausting for women too. Like, to have to feel like if the second that you leave, your husband's basically just gonna run amok and act like some kind of a man-child and destroy his life, destroy your marriage, like all this kind of stuff. Like, that's a lot of pressure on women, and that's a lot of stress. And the fact that you can see, obviously, these men are not living in their own happiness. They're not really fulfilled in their own purpose, and they're not finding their purpose. And when they do have the space, like their family leaving, and they don't have the distractions of their intimate partner and their family, instead of taking that time to connect with other men in a healthy way, to find their passion and purpose and actually like pursue something that's greater than themselves, they just numb themselves out by all kinds of, you know, addictions or promiscuous behavior, gambling, or things like that. And Richard is so like, maybe this is my own trigger and my own sensitivity, but he's so in this like woe is me thing. It's like, oh, my wife doesn't really care about me. She doesn't really get jealous. She doesn't really care about me. And I do feel like when he tells Marilyn Monroe's character about this in this kind of like, oh, my wife doesn't get jealous. Why would she get jealous of me? What do I have to offer? I'm not what women want. I do think in this particular film it's coming from a genuine place, but I gotta be honest, like, I mean, I know I've fallen for that line, you know, that my wife doesn't understand me anymore kind of line, or like women are so mean to me line. Guys will use that as a manipulation tactic. I'm not saying every guy does, and there are some guys out there who have some real insecurities in this wounded feminine energy particularly, and they really feel this way.
Isn't she jealous?
Not really. Why should Helen be jealous of me? How can anybody be jealous of somebody with a briefcase? Who's getting a little pot? Who gets so sleepy by 9:30 he can't keep his eyes open? She trusts me. It would never even occur to her that like last Christmas, I came home from the office party. I had lipstick on my collar. You know what Helen said? She said, "Darling, what's that on your collar? Cranberry sauce?"
That's bad.
You know who kissed me? Old Mrs. Brady. Let's face it. No pretty girl in her right mind wants me. She wants Gregory Peck.
Is that so?
Well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very like woe is me kind of thing. And I do feel like to a certain extent, because Marilyn Monroe's character is so young, she's so wide-eyed, she's so innocent, she kind of falls for it. And there's actually a speech that she gives where she kind of talks about like, oh, so you think women want this? And she basically describes like a macho jerk. And she's like, no, what women actually want is this. And she describes basically the sweet, sensitive guy.
How do you know what a pretty girl wants?
Well, I don't really know. But I imagine a pretty...
You and your imagination. You think every girl's a dope. You think a girl goes to a party and there's some guy, a great big lunk in a fancy striped vest, strutting around like a tiger, giving you that, I'm so handsome you can't resist me look. And from this, she's supposed to fall flat on her face. Well, she doesn't fall on her face. But there's another guy in the room, way over in the corner. Maybe he's kind of nervous and shy and perspiring a little. First you look past him, but then you sort of sense that he's gentle and kind and worried, and that he'll be tender with you. Nice and sweet. That's what's really exciting. If I were your wife, I'd be very jealous of you. I'd be very, very jealous.
Because she's still young enough, and probably an attractive young woman, and she's in the entertainment business, has probably dealt with a lot of macho jerks before. So that like nice, sweet guy can seem really appealing because he seems less threatening. When at the end of the day, if you think about the way he's treating his wife, if you think about the fact that, yeah, she's young and pretty and she might be the next new exciting thing if they were to run off together. At the end of the day, he's going to turn around and end up treating her the same way that he's treating his wife. He's just going to go out and look for somebody younger and newer, and she's not going to satisfy him either, because at the end of the day, like, a younger woman doesn't have the same expectations because she doesn't have the same life experience of expecting a man to fully step into his masculinity. Whereas as the woman gets older, the more she is like, no, I expect a man to be a leader and step into his masculinity, because she's matured, she understands what she wants, and she understands what's important in a relationship. Whereas younger women in general, and I'm massively generalizing here, can get, I think, more easily fooled into thinking that a man's sensitivity is enough, when eventually, like, that sensitivity is going to start to grate on her, and she's going to decide she really needs to control him too, and she's going to get tired of being in that controlling relationship energy. I mean, I just think all around this film is an example of the way it portrays marriage, and the fact that it was portraying marriage in this sort of miserable way, and this sort of, you know, massively like wounded feminine energy in men, and women aren't portrayed quite so much in this, but like that the wives are like the controlling ones, that are the ones that keep the men from like having their fun. The fact that this was the way marriage and relationships were being portrayed back in the 1950s, I think is kind of evident as to why relationships and marriages kind of started to deteriorate, because nobody was happy and nobody knew how to actually step into that real, like, their real natural core energy, so that the men could step into that masculine leadership and the women could actually relax into their feminine energy, and they could actually have sexual polarity, which I have a video where I talk about sexual polarity in more detail. So, like, is the 7-year itch real? I mean, there is this theory about, like, at the 7-year mark in a marriage, the relationships deteriorate and everybody wants to go off and have affairs. And I don't really know if 7 years, I think 7 years is really kind of arbitrary. I think there might have been some kind of a, I don't know if it was a real life research study or if this was all just made up solely for the film, but there is this concept that at a certain point in a relationship, couples lose their sexual attraction to each other. That happens when the polarity in a relationship dies out. So like if both partners in the relationship end up in their feminine energy, then they tend to end up a little bit more like girlfriends. They gossip, they share their emotions, all that kind of stuff, but like there's no sexual energy. If both partners in the relationship end up in their masculine energy, they tend to just butt heads all the time. They're constantly in competition and they're always competing. They're usually fighting, usually arguing. In that situation, you don't tend to have that sexual attraction because you're just always butting heads. You can't ever actually like agree on anything. Or if both partners end up in a wounded version, so like if a man is naturally masculine at his core and he ends up in that very wounded feminine energy, then the female in the relationship, if she's feminine at her core and she ends up in a very wounded masculine energy, because the wounded feminine is kind of being erratic and unstable, and the wounded masculine needs to control the situation so that things don't go out of control and needs to create safety. That's going to build up a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, and people are going to be so out of their natural energies that they're not going to be able to come together sexually. So the key to keeping that sexual attraction, to keeping that polarity in the relationship, is for people to heal the reasons why they might be not in their natural energies, and to learn to spend the majority of their time in their natural core energies, assuming those core energies are opposite, and that keeps sexual attraction. And in that situation, you can keep sexual attraction alive as long as the relationship stays alive, as long as you want it to. So like, is the 7-year itch real? I mean, again, certain factors can factor in. I mean, kids can kind of mess up the polarity dynamic, people's careers, like life can come in and affect polarity. It's whenever that polarity is off and couples don't make the effort to get back into polarity, that's usually when the relationship deteriorates sexually from that perspective. So yeah, this film did get me kind of riled up, I have to admit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this film, because again, I do think, I mean, Marilyn in this film is great, but you know, the fact that they don't even really give her a name shows that, you know, she's really just kind of like this nameless image, and you know, that does kind of bug me a bit. And you know, I really don't like the way that this portrays marriage and relationships, and I think this is propaganda. I think this is partly, I mean, I've said this in a lot of videos before, but I think, you know, if you want to destroy a society, destroy the dynamic between men and women and relationships, and like that relationship family dynamic, because that's the way that you're going to destroy a society. And I think that, I think this has been going on for a long time. So yeah, if you want to know more about my conspiracy theories on these things, I have other videos where I talk about that. But that was my review of The 7-Year Itch. I would love to hear your thoughts on this film. If you have any other film recommendations or TV shows or anything like that you would like, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. I love your suggestions. If you'd like to connect with your own inner feminine energy, I have an online course you can sign up for. The details of that will be in the description box below, along with links to my social media profiles if you'd like to check those out. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.